Hello and very good afternoon, everyone. I am Nitika and I welcome you all again to another episode in our series Bulldoze. So, today I am going to discuss in the series of the HDI report, that is Human Development Index report, which we have done previously. So, आज हम लोग HDI रिपोर्ट के ही एक एक्सटेंशन और आप ये कह सकते हैं कि HDI रिपोर्ट को और भी ज्यादा उसे एग्जेम्प्लीफाई करते हुए या उसको एक्सप्लेन करते हुए वी हैव two more reports which recently came up. So socio-economic indicators are very important for any country, for any economy to vision their growth in the future. For example, if how many percentage of population are living below poverty line, what percentage of child or people are facing the hunger and starvation, what is the level of maternal mortality or infant mortality, and even what is the level of starvation in the economy. So all these parameters are very important to take into consideration when we talk about the overall development of any economy. So previously we have done Human Development Index report, wherein we take into account the three key indicators, that is the health, education and gross national per capita income according to PPP. And today I am going to discuss the multidimensional poverty and the global hunger index, the GHI global hunger index, which has recently come up. So let's get started. So recently, the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index is launched by the United Nations Development Program, which is a specialized agency of United Nations, and the OPHI, which stands for Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative. So these two organizations have launched this report, and it is renowned, it's a widely used report whenever we take into account the poverty alleviation measures in any economy. So this report gives a clear picture of all the policies, schemes launched by a government, and these are a check to all of them that if they are working well in the economy or not. So firstly, let us understand how do these organizations have defined the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index and what are the indicators that are taken into account. So ideally, you can see here, there will be three indicators, there will be three key indicators, that is the health, education and standard of living, right? So there are three key areas which are taken into account, and 10 indicators broadly will be considered while collecting the report and compiling this report, right? Speaking of the indicators individually, first one is nutrition, second child mortality, years in schooling, school attendance, intensity of poverty. Fourth, we have head count ratio. Then in the standard of living, which is how well or what is the standard of living that you have, what are the assets that you have, what is your type of living in your particular area. So it takes into account the cooking fuel, sanitation, the sanitation of your home, of your area, the drinking water, whether you have access to the drinking water, safe drinking water or not, electricity, number of hours the electricity is of course provided to you, housing, what is the type of housing, if it is a proper built constructed home or it is not, right? Then last one is the assets that you have. Okay, so this report was first started in the year 2010 by the OPHI and the UNDP, and since then this report is a check to the poverty, to the overall poverty in the economies, right? So moving further to the indicators, now these indicators are given a specific weightage in the overall score, which tells us that okay, this particular indicator will be given this much weightage. As you can see here, so this is a chart which basically defines, for example, the nutrition, how do we check it? So an adult which is under the 70 years of age or a child which is undernourished, that has been considered, and the weightage given to them is 1/6, right? And the next is child mortality. So any child which has died in a family in the 5-year period preceding the survey, right? Then years of schooling, if there is no household member aged 10 years or older who has completed 6 years of schooling. Then school attendance, cooking fuel, sanitation, drinking water, electricity. For example, if any household has no electricity or no meter connection at all. So even there are so many families wherein there are no meter connections at all. Even you must have observed it in the slum areas, because they do not have any meter connection due to their housing conditions, which is again one of the indicator which depicts the standard of living in that particular area, right? Then speaking of the housing material which has been used, so at least one of the roof, walls or floor, if they are inadequate and they are using the natural materials, that we are considering that the housing conditions are not good. If they are not made up of concrete material, if they are made up of only natural materials, right? Then the assets that the household has, for example, if you have TV, telephone, computer, radio, so all these things actually tells us that okay, you are quite well off, okay, you are at least able to manage your standard of living. So these are the key indicators with their respective weightage that is considered while taking look at the dimensions or the report of the poverty, right? So moving ahead with the key findings of this report, right? So it is ideally considered that a person is considered as a multidimensionally poor if he or she is deprived in 1/3 or more. So if if we had 10 indicators, out of 10, if more than 3 indicators you have underperformed, or you can say if if the person is deprived in 1/3 or more of the weighted indicators out of the 10, so those who are deprived in 1/2 or more of the weighted indicators are considered extremely poor, right? So if you are performing somewhere or the other, 3 to 4 indicators, you are underperforming in 3 to 4 indicators, then you are considered as multidimensionally poor. But you will come in the extreme category if your performance out of 10 in more than 5 indicators is poor, right? If more than 5 indicators you are underperforming, you're not performing well, you will be considered as extremely multidimensional poor. However, if it is ranging between 3 to 5, then you are the multidimensional poor. Okay. So coming up with the highlights this year. So Global Multidimensional Index of 2022, it has covered nearly 111 countries, 111 developing countries. And this report shows that India is progressing, further, and it outranks the countries worldwide and has also contributed to decline in the overall poverty in South Asia. Even if, India is performing good in reducing the poverty, but it has been observed that the reduction rate as in 2019 or 2018 was higher. But in 2020-2021, we have added the poors, we have added the number of poors due to the COVID pandemic, which has slightly increased the level of poverty in India. But now we are again back in the track and we are again trying to control the poverty in our nation. So even there is one more organization which has come up with this kind of report, that is World Bank has also given a report on the poverty, and it also stated that overall economies, the world has underperformed in eradicating poverty during the COVID-19 pandemic, and especially when during the Ukraine-Russia war is, it is on its peak right now. So even now the poverty is performing worse, and ever since 2011, even India has seen a reduction in the poverty. But during this pandemic time, India has seen a slight up in the poverty, in the overall poverty, right? So moving on to what it states, that nearly 41.5 crore people in the country, they were lifted out of the poverty between 2005 and 2019 to 20, and 14 crores of which were since 2015 and 16. So the increase in the global poverty is the first since the 1998, while the increase in India is the first since 2011. So as I was mentioning, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the global poverty has increased this year due to the pandemic. And ever since 1998, we have not seen this rise in poverty. But in context of India, since 2011, there was a decline in the poverty. But because of the pandemic, we have seen a slight rise. Okay. So then next, I was just about to mention that even World Bank, which has come up with such a report that is called as Poverty and Shared Prosperity 2022. So this report has come up in September, and again it is very much and similar to multidimensional poverty index. However, World Bank defines poverty as a number of, or the poor's as a number of the people living on the less than $2.15 a day. So they have defined poverty in a way that if you are spending less than $2.15 or 177 rupees, below 177 rupees a day, then you are considered as a poor. Okay. So now this has increased to an estimated 9.3% in the year 2020, which is up from 8.4% in 2019. So almost the reports are quite similar, and it shows that yes, COVID-19 has made aggravating impact on the overall poverty, and somewhere or the other the deprivations are still there, and it has gone up rather going down. Right. So this comes definitely, in the pipeline in 2022, considering the timeline from 2017 to 2022. Because see, poverty cannot be explained or cannot be observed in a span of 1 year. Definitely, it needs to be studied for a good number of years. So the reports like these, they take up a good span of 4 to 5 years, and then they give their final report that yes, we have observed that the poverty from 2017 to 19 was going down, but from 19 to 22 it has gone up, right? So this is very important, guys, because poverty, or many times we actually put a question mark on these reports that if they are authentic or not. So these are somewhere or the other related to the data which is provided by the India's organizations, or maybe some governmental data is also used in these reports. So definitely their authenticity is on a higher range. And for the competitive exams, these reports are very important, because the reports indices, they are one after other, they have been asked in the examination. Either they can ask you about the rankings, they can ask you about the number of population, percentage of population, and definitely even this can be asked that this report is republished by which organization. So you must keep a note of all these pointers somewhere in your notes, so that whenever there is any recent exam that you're going to appear, you can just go through it and revise it, right? So according to the World Bank's report, as I had just mentioned, so the number of global poor has increased by 7.1 crore people, of which between 33 to 80% are actually from India. So this is again a big report. So if there are 7.1 crore people who are considered as poor, so between 33 and 80% poors are living only and only in India. So I know that India is a big economy with a bigger population, of course, but and the share of poor living in India is also great. But in contrast to China, which is again a largest population size nation in the world, the share of contribution of China in the poverty is quite less if we compare it with India. So this is a very contrasting data that we've got, that China on one hand is performing so well in the poverty, on the other hand India is not at all performing great in the overall poverty index. So the latest estimate of World Bank is again using poverty in back from 2017 to 2019, as I had discussed, and from 2019 onwards, of course, the data has been taken in a way that a good span of time is being considered, and according to this data, as you can see here, from 2020, if you see, so in 2019, this is the line, or 136.8 is the number, which is the number for the Indians poor in the overall, in the global poverty, and this is the range of the Indian poors in the overall poverty. So as you can see that over the period of time from 2019 to 2020, the share of Indian poor, or the share of India's contribution in the overall poverty, has actually increased, right? And on the upper hand side, this is the of course, this is the pre-COVID projection and the current projection. So this shows that from 2019, of course, the poverty has gone up 9.3, 8.8, 8.4, and it is going to take, if we see it like this, that if we currently, whatever efforts we are making, if we continue making that, and again, if we consider that there will be no contingency and no exigencies in future, only then we will be able to achieve 6.5 to 6.8%. But our sustainable development goal, the SDG, which is to be fulfilled and which is to be realized till 2030. So under the sustainable development goals, we had projected our overall poverty percentage to be only 3% of the total world population. So our target was to keep it as low as 3%, but because of this COVID-19 pandemic, the future the future trajectory says that it will be doubled than 3. It is somewhere going to be around 6.5 to 6.8, but not 3%. But definitely, we are trying our level best. All the countries are trying their level best to actually catch up this gap. So let's just see that by 2030 we get some good news, definitely. Right? So moving further, of course, according to this report, the children are the poorest sufferers. So children are still the poorest age group, with more than 1 in the 5, or you can say 21.8% children being poor, as compared to around 1 in the 7 adults. So if there are 7 adults, only 1 is poor, and if there are 5 children, so every 1 out of 5 children is poor. So this is of course one gap which we have seen, that children are the worst sufferers of the poverty. Then speaking of, very important, the urban-rural divide, because we know that this divide has always sustained from centuries now. So the percentage of people who are poor is 21.2% in India in the rural areas, as compared with 5.5% in the urban areas. So still it states that in urban areas the percent population of poverty is lesser than the urban than the rural areas. So in the rural areas, the poor people are more, but in the urban areas, the poverty is little lesser, right? Yes, we can relate it with the job opportunities, with the standard of living, with the kind of services which is being provided, the utility services provided, definitely. So if we work on these gaps in a way that we can replicate the urban models in the rural areas as well, so this poverty can be narrowed down. Then next we have the rural areas, which accounts for nearly 90% of the poor people. Nearly 205 million of 229 million people poor lives in the rural areas, making them a clear priority. And only 23 countries covered have a higher proportion of poor people living in the rural areas. So this is again a very contrasting data. Out of 111 nations, 23 nations are there where the proportion of poor living in rural areas is higher than the urban areas. So which means that yes, there are many countries where the population of poor living in urban areas is higher than the rural areas. So maybe the possibilities of it are the migration ratio also. So if the poor are migrating from rural to urban in search of job, but they couldn't get it, so this can also be one of the reason that why the urban population are they contributing more in the poverty than the rural areas, right? So this is one such report on the multidimensional poverty index, which is related to the again, which is related to the rural-urban divide. So, notably and significantly, we know that there are many government flagship programs which are currently pipeline, and they are also currently successfully, as per government, they are running successfully in the nation. For example, Ujjwal Yojana, which is providing LPG connections, then Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana for affordable housing, Poshan Abhiyan for holistic nourishment, and Swachh Bharat Mission for the sanitation. So this report has found out that among the poor people, the most common deprivation were in cooking fuel, housing, nutrition and sanitation. So despite these four flagship programs of the government, this report is in contrast to what government projects us, which is that still in India, the poverty indicators, or the worst performing indicators, are the fuel, cooking fuel, housing, sanitation and nutrition. So I think somewhere there are gaps in what the programs actually projects and what final delivery it is giving to the people in India. So definitely there are gaps which is creating a negative impact on the overall poverty, right? So moving ahead with the next index, that is the Global Hunger Index. So speaking of the Global Hunger Index, which is prepared by a European NGO of concern worldwide and World Hunger Health. So these two organizations are there which have created this report, that is the Hunger Index. And this report consists, or it takes data from 116 nations. From 116 nations, and India has ranked 101 in this particular report, right? Right? So very much in similar to what multidimensional poverty index said. So of course India in MPI has not performed well. Somewhere or the other, it has the largest number of poor people living worldwide at 22.8 crores, and followed by Nigeria, which is 9.6 crores. So India is somewhere or the other adding 22.8 crores poor in the overall poverty, in the overall you can say poor in the world. So this is again a big number. Now coming to the Global Hunger Index. So Hunger Index states that India is ranking 101 out of 116, which means yes, these situation of malnutrition, the child wasting, child stunting, child mortality is prevalent in India as well, which is why India has underperformed in the Global Hunger Index as well. So this is an annual report, and each set of GHI scores uses a data from a 5-year period. Again, so a 5-year period is taken into account to take out this one report, right? So the GHI scores are calculated using the data from 2017 through 2021. So this is the data range which is being taken while calculating the GHI, which is Global Hunger Index. So in the Global Hunger Index, one thing is very important, that we GHI scores are based on the 4 important components, and they are child nourishment, then child stunting, child wasting and child mortality. So these are the 4 important indicators which compiles, and the GHI scores are then being calculated, right? So GHI scores are calculated on a scale of 100 pointer, and they reflect the severity of hunger. So the 0 is the best score, which implies that there is no hunger in the nation. On the other hand, 100 is the worst performing, which means that this nation has performed worst in the overall hunger index. So again, like I had mentioned, that this is the one which takes into account the basically the child data. So it is only and only related to the child and not the adults, right? So globally, this report mentioned that the progress against the hunger has already stagnated during the pandemic time. So which again, it is very much in parallel to MPI, to HDI, and even the poverty and shared report, which is given by the World Bank, right? So according to this report, the Belarus, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and China, Chile, and Croatia. So these are the top performing nations in 2022. On the other hand, Chad, Democratic Republic of Congo, Madagascar, Central African Republic, and Yemen, they are the countries which are at the bottom of the index, right? If we speak of India and the neighboring countries, so among the South Asian nations, India has ranked 107. Then it is ranked below with the Sri Lanka, which is ranking at 64, Nepal at 81, Bangladesh 84, and Pakistan at 99. Right? So somewhere or the other, definitely, as we know, that India has performed worse than the neighboring countries. Okay, so the plausible causes of the increasing hunger in the world, definitely, the climate change, the COVID-19 pandemic, the economic fallout of COVID-19 pandemic, then Russia-Ukraine war is again, it is another event which is adding to all the poor performance in the socio-economic indicators. Definitely all of these events have increased the food crisis, the fuel crisis, which had definitely added up to the inflation. So it has further inflated the domestic prices of all these items, and even the international markets are so volatile these days, these years, that it has caused a lot of gap in all these socio-economic indicators. So as per this index, there are only 44 countries that currently have serious or alarming hunger levels, and without a major shift, neither the world nor a whole nor approximately 46 nations are projected to achieve even low hunger as measured by the GHI by the 2030. So again, sustainable development goals have been set up to be achieved by 2030. But we are not at all expecting any of the nations, or not more than 46 nations, to be even closer to what we have targeted for 2030. So this is again one such sad news, I would say, that still the child are being undernourished, they are malnourished, they are not being taken care of. The stunting is going up, the wasting is going up, and even the child mortality is at its peak. So India has a score of 29.1, which places it under the serious category. So India is under the serious category, right? And Afghanistan, which is the only country in the South Asia that performs worse than India on this index. So Afghanistan is ranking at 109. Rest all the neighboring countries have performed well in this particular index. So China, with a score of less than 5, has topped the chart, of course, in the South Asia. And again, China has performed well in all of these major indicators, right? So speaking of India's child wasting rate, so child wasting is the low weight for the height. So if a child is achieving a certain height at a certain age, so it is expected that the child's weight should be this much standardized. So if a child is below the standardized weight, then it is called as child wasting. So it is definitely India's child wasting is standing at 19.3%, which is worse than the record level of 2014. So it is highest for any country. And speaking of the undernourishment, so prevalence of undernourishment in India has even gone up from the levels of 2018 to 2030. So it is currently 16.3%. 16.3% of undernourishment, right? It is undernourishment. The next, child stunting and child mortality. So child stunting, it is low height for an age. So which means a low height for an age. If a certain, a certain age has a certain height which is to be standardized. For example, if a child is 5 years old, so he's expected to be 1 foot or 2 foot. Let us say according, if the child is properly fed, of course, and keeping all the medical conditions aside, then bringing up a child in a normal conditions and giving him a proper food will make the child attain a certain height. So if the child is below that standardized height, then it is of course called as child stunting. So in India, the child stunting has definitely declined from before. So it has declined to 35.5%. 35.5% is the stunting. And speaking of child mortality, so child mortality is the death of the child which is under the age of 5, the mortality of a mortality rate under the age of 5. So it has also dropped down to 3.3% in this particular period. So however, in few indicators India has performed well, but in some indicators India has performed worse, which has actually made its score quite on a serious threat side. So this is the global hunger index which we have just discussed, and definitely Indian government has taken several initiatives to to tackle the undernourishment in the economy. For example, we have Eat Right India movement, Poshan Abhiyan, we have Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana, food fortification, then we have National Food Security Act of 2013, Mission Indradhanush, and the Integrated Child Development Services Scheme. And all of these are directed towards the nutritional level. These are the nutritional program to provide a certain level of nutrition to all the children, to all the people, to provide them food, and to to tackle the food insecurities in India. But yes, there are some gaps as per this report. So these reports are again, like I had mentioned before, these are a clear check that definitely we need to take some strict actions, strict schemes. We must look at the policy implementations at the deep down level, at the grassroots level, that if they are implemented properly or not. So there must be a audit mechanisms should be there in every city, in every district, so that these schemes can be closely monitored, right? So that is all for today, students. I hope that you like this session, and if you did like this, kindly share it among your friends, and don't forget to subscribe our channel, because if you will subscribe our channel, then only you will get these kind of content. And we are actually touched with the kind of support that you are giving, that the love you all are giving, and we pray that you keep loving us, keep giving us the kind of support, and we even want more and more support from you all. So thank you so much everyone, and we'll see you next week. And of course, it's the Diwali week, the most important festival in India. It is celebrated everywhere. So happy Diwali to all of you, and may you have a blessed way, may you have the most happiest of the Diwali ever, and please be safe. Do not burn the crackers, just play a very safe Diwali, and meet your friends, meet your family. If you're living far, then go and meet your family, just spend some time with them, and just have a blissful Diwali. Thank you so much everyone.